On a cool spring morning in May 1968, along a stretch of Kentucky back road outside Georgetown, a man made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He had pulled off the road, not far from U.S. Route 25, to scout for glass bottles that could be returned for a few cents. His eyes moved across the thick brush and the carpet of fallen leaves when something caught his attention. Something out of place, protruding from beneath a sheet of weathered canvas. At first glance, he thought it might be an abandoned mannequin, a leftover from some roadside display. But as he stepped closer, the truth began to set in. What lay there was not plastic. It was flesh. A young woman, her body already decomposing, wrapped crudely in a green tarpaulin, often used to cover tents or equipment. Shocked, he ran to alert authorities. Soon, sheriff's deputies and state police swarmed the quiet spot. They rolled back the tarp and confirmed what the passerby had seen. A female, petite, dark-haired, dressed in simple clothes. She bore no identification, and the elements had already taken their toll on her face. The coroner estimated her age between 16 and 25, but beyond that, little could be said. She had no scars, no tattoos, no wedding band. Dental record would have been the best chance, but with no name to match, they were meaningless. What investigators had was a body, a canvas covering, and a gnawing sense that somewhere, someone was missing her. In 1968, forensic science was a blunt instrument compared to what would become decades later. DNA analysis was still a fantasy, something out of science fiction. Fingerprints required a comparison to an existing set, and there was no national database to run them against. Missing persons reports were scattered across county and state lines, written in dusty ledgers or typed onto paper that sat in file cabinets. If a young woman vanished in Ohio or Tennessee, there was little chance Kentucky law enforcement would ever know about it unless someone called them directly. The body was taken to the local morgue, where the coroner performed an autopsy. The cause of death was never conclusively determined, though signs suggested foul play, possibly strangulation or blunt force trauma. What struck the police most was the effort someone had made to conceal her, rolling her inside the tent canvas and discarding her in a rural spot where traffic was sparse. It spoke of panic, desperation, or at least a desire that she never be found. Yet found she was. Without a name, though, the investigation faltered almost immediately. Detectives canvassed the area, asked around about any missing girls, contacted nearby towns, but nothing matched. There were missing women all across America, but the trail from Georgetown, Kentucky, led nowhere specific. Newspapers picked up the story, and the unidentified victim became a grim local mystery. Someone gave her a moniker that stuck. Tent Girl. It was descriptive, almost cold, but it was easier than repeating unidentified female wrapped in tarpaulin. For decades, that is how she would be known. Tent Girl. Her body was laid to rest in Georgetown Cemetery. The headstone bore no name, only the epitaph. Tent Girl. Found May 17, 1968. Age about 16 to 19 years. Height 5 feet 1 inch. Weight 110 to 115 pounds. Unknown. That word, unknown, was carved into stone, as final as death itself. Time passed. The case grew colder with each passing year. The files gathering dust. Detectives who had once been determined to crack it retired or died. Witnesses' memories faded. The people who had stumbled across her grave marker might have wondered occasionally who she'd been. But soon Tent Girl was a ghost of the county. A mystery mentioned in hushed tones. An oddity children whispered about on schoolyard walks through the cemetery. But mysteries have a way of waiting for the right person. In this case, it was a man named Todd Matthews. Todd was not a detective. He was not a journalist, nor a coroner, nor even a historian. In the early 1990s, he was just a factory worker from Livingston, Tennessee, living a modest life. But he had something else. Curiosity, persistence, and a fascination with stories that refused to let go. His connection to Tent Girl began through family. He had married into the family of the man who had discovered the body in 1968. Around dinner tables and family gatherings, the story would resurface. The man who had found her would retell the events of that morning. The sight of the tarp, the horror of realizing it wasn't a mannequin. For most, it was just a sad tale. For Todd, it became an obsession. The early 1990s were a strange, exciting time for people with unusual fascinations. The internet was still in its infancy, clunky and slow, but it was beginning to connect people in ways that had never been possible. For the first time, an amateur with no badge or credentials could reach across states, even countries, to share information. Todd saw in it a tool, a way to cast 10 girls' story far beyond the borders of Scott County, Kentucky. He began by collecting every scrap of information he could. He visited the cemetery, read the gravestone, pulled newspaper clippings from library archives. He learned what little the coroner had recorded: approximate age, stature, features. He noted the canvas covering, a detail that seemed oddly specific. And then he went online. In those days, websites dedicated to missing persons were rudimentary, often just static lists of names, descriptions, and last known sightings. But for Todd, it was a revelation. Here were hundreds of cases, thousands of them, stretching back decades. He spent hours scrolling through them, searching for a girl who matched 10 girls' description. He reached out to other amateur sleuths, trading notes, building connections. Slowly, a network began to form, men and women driven not by paychecks, but by the quiet conviction that every missing person deserved to be found. It was not easy. For years, Todd sifted through dead ends. 10 girl could have been anyone, from anywhere: a runaway, a victim of domestic abuse, a woman who fell prey to a drifter. The lack of leads was suffocating. Yet Todd pressed on, guided by an almost stubborn hope that someone, somewhere, would recognize her story. He began posting about 10 girl in early internet forums, detailing what was known, attaching her sketch, urging anyone with information come forward. Most days, the silence was deafening. But the internet has a long memory, and it only takes one person in the right place to change everything. In 1998, 30 years after 10 girl was buried without a name, Todd stumbled across a missing persons report from the late 1960s. A young woman named Barbara Ann Hackmann had vanished from Lexington, Kentucky. She was 19 years old, married, with a child. Her husband claimed she had left him, walking out without explanation. Her family had searched, but as the years stretched on, hope dwindled. Official reports of her disappearance were scarce, buried in paper archives. The description of Barbara and caught Todd's attention. She was small, about 5'1", with dark hair, a weight of just over 100 pounds. The timeline fit, the geography fit, but most chilling of all was the detail that she had disappeared around the same time 10 girl was found, less than 100 miles away. Todd contacted Barbara Ann's family. He explained his research: the grave in Georgetown, the unidentified woman buried under the name 10 girl. It was a delicate conversation. After all, he was a stranger, a factory worker with no official capacity, calling with what might sound like a wild theory. But the family listened. They had never stopped wondering what had become of Barbara Ann. They agreed to provide DNA samples to compare against the remains. By the late 1990s, DNA analysis had finally become available to law enforcement, a tool that was unimaginable in 1968. The samples were taken, tested, and then the results came in. It was a match. 10 girl was not a nameless ghost after all. She was Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor.